I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the conference chair for streaming media, and I'm also chief marketing officer at a startup called Ideas. And I welcome you to session 2 of day 1 of our 10th Streaming Media Connect virtual event. We'll be back in person in Boston for Streaming Media East, May 18th and 19th with the Content Delivery Summit, which is relevant to if you're watching this session right now, on May 17th. And information about both of those events will be going online. The landing pages are already up, but the programs will be going online within the next week. So check out Streaming Media East and the Content Delivery Summit and sign up. The earlier you sign up, the better deal you get. But I'm glad to be back here once again for our virtual event. Before we jump in, just a few housekeeping notes. I don't need to give the note about the Amazon gift card because we already have a winner. But that winner's name is obscured on my screen at the moment, and I will read it at the end anyway, because you got to be present all the way through at the end of the session to claim your Amazon gift card. If you have questions for our panelists, please enter them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. The moderator will grab those questions live as they come in or save them until the end of the hour and ask them of the panelists. Also, subtitles are turned on. If you are seeing them and you want to turn them off, go to the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen and select Disable Transcript. Finally, all of the Streaming Media Connect sessions will be available on demand starting next week. Go to streamingmedia.com, click on videos, and select conference videos. I'd like to thank our diamond sponsor, Signient, for helping to bring all of these sessions to you this week. And we have a brief video message from them now.
Wherever content needs to flow, the Signient platform can move any size file over any IP network at speeds that can be up to 100 times faster than traditional transfer methods. More than 50,000 businesses use the Signient platform to send and share files, automate movement of data between systems, exchange content with global partners, and move content to and from the cloud. The Signient platform gives you the power to operate at the speed you need to run your business.
And I would also like to thank the sponsor of this session, and that's Zenlayer. And Zenlayer's Wade Chen will be joining our panelists and moderator to talk about overcoming edge and CDN infrastructure challenges. And I know they've got lots to cover. So with that, I will pass the mic and the camera to our moderator, Mark de Jong. Mark, how are you?
Hi, Eric. Good to see you.
You as well. Take it away.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I have 4 great panelists on this session about Edge. So I would like to welcome Sean, Pankaj, Kevin, and Wade to turn on their cameras and mics. And then we will get started. First, Pankaj from Disney Streaming. Could you give us a short introduction of what you do within Disney Streaming?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak here. Thanks, Mark. So my name is Pankaj. I work at Disney Streaming, primarily work in the capacity of an architect. And I work with a team that manages content delivery, media delivery for Disney Streaming's products, which are Disney Plus, Hulu's Bought in Live, Star Plus, and ESPN Plus.
Perfect. Thank you, Pankaj. Sean McCarthy, also well known. Could you give a little heads up on what you do within Paramount?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Happy to talk to you guys today. I'm Sean McCarthy. I'm a product manager within the video technology group at Paramount. So we're sort of a central services team responsible for a lot of platform video products. We service all the internal brands. So think Pluto TV, Paramount Plus, CBS News, Sports, Network 10. And primarily I'm responsible for our CDN problem space. So basically all things, CDN and media data. Really CDN decisioning, API orchestration of multi-CDN environments, and operational visibility.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks. Kevin Gao from Amazon. Could you give a small introduction about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. My name is Kevin Gao, and I'm excited to be here. Currently, I'm the principal solution architect focusing on global direct-to-consumer space within our Amazon partners. In the AWS partner work, we have more than 400 AWS partners against 5 solution areas to help customer transform the media and entertainment industry. The 5 solution areas are content production, media supply chain and archive, broadcast, direct-to-consumer and streaming, and data science and analytics. So in my current role, I work with partners to determine where the resources are best applied and actively work with them to remove those bottlenecks. So I look forward to today's talk and learn from each of the panelists as well.
Thank you, Kevin. And then last but not least, Chen from Zenlayer. Can you give an intro about yourself, please?
Sure, thanks, Mark. So I'm the VP of our technology alliance at Zenlayer. So I mainly deal with a lot of our hyperscalers and the ISV partners, creating joint products and solutions that can leverage our Edge platform, and then working with a lot of these partners to ID new use cases, and then see how we can optimize their workflows to work better on the Edge. That's it.
Perfect, thanks, Wade. Okay, guys, we have a lot of stuff to discuss during the hour. Edge, as we know, is still a little bit of a vague term that's being used. I should have recorded the last couple of years about how everybody described the Edge in the last couple of years, because that keeps changing for some reason. But just to understand your position, I'll start with you, Wade. What do you define as Edge right now in what you're doing as Zenlayer and in general?
Yeah, it's a great way to start it off, because like you said, everyone has a different opinion on what that is. For Zenlayer, we have about 300 global POPs, and then we consider the Edge as a data center edge. So typically we define this as a city or cities within a region, and then we'll always look for something that has either an IX or it's one of the core network cities where there's a lot of interaction, and then it's mainly to reach the eyeballs, right? And we're very heavy in the Asia Pacific and emerging markets, so we're talking about those kind of edge cities where it's not as common.
Okay, so really looking at the data center,
yeah,
as a footprint for where the edge locations are. Kevin, could you give the Amazon view on Edge? I know there are different things that you do within the Edge within Amazon, so I think you have different positions you can talk about.
Well, this is streaming media conference. So in the context of streaming media, the edge is referred to the point which the content is delivered to the end user. So it's the location closest to the user where the content is cached and delivered, reducing the distance that data have to travel to improve the quality of the user experience. Traditionally, the edge was provided usually by large data centers, but with the growth of cloud computing and increase of demands for lower latency, higher quality of streaming, the edge is becoming more and more decentralized and distributed. So this allows content to be cached and delivered from multiple locations closer to the end users and provide more reliable and efficient services.
Okay, and if you look at, because I know Amazon is doing a couple of things, you have CDN, you have cloud. I know you guys are also integrating with telecom operators to get even deeper. So every point that you, but yeah, basically have different layers of edges in your case, then is that correct?
Yeah, so I could talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to take up the whole session. So use Amazon, for example. We have local zones. Local zones are type of AWS infrastructure deployment that place compute, storage, database, and other select services closer to the larger population or IT centers. This enables customers to deliver applications that require single-digit millisecond latency to the end users. And then we have wavelength. So AWS wavelength zones are AWS infrastructures that deploys embedded in AWS compute and storage services within the telco provider data center at the edge of their 4G or 5G networks. And in addition, we have Outposts. AWS Outposts is a family of fully managed solutions delivering AWS infrastructures and services to any on-prem services or edge locations. This means the customer could have AWS hardware where they need it on whether it's on-prem and connect their hardware like they would in a AWS region.
Good, thank you. Gavin, gives you a good indication. Pankaj, from a distance standpoint, from your standpoint, how do you look at edge?
Yeah, so as a content provider, and I think my definition kind of matches with Kevin's, because and especially for MySpace as well too, which is not MySpace, a social network, MySpace of the media streaming. Sorry, for delivering content to the end users, the edge for us is the point that is closest to the end user, where we can affect change either directly or indirectly to kind of improve performance. And primarily, we affect change indirectly because the points of distribution are something that we partner with different partners. So CDNs are a good example. So we work with them to directly or indirectly kind of affect change from a QA point of view. But then we also have our own Disney Edge. So we have our own direct control with respect to the hardware where it is deployed. And so we can affect change directly through that aspect as well too. And then generally with respect to where the edge is available, like physically, it is pretty much everywhere. If you're looking at, if you're generally at home, your home devices are connected to the edge, which is either at your data centers, or if you're an open cache provider, then you are running your cache nodes or edge nodes at the ISP's data center. But if you are some device manufacturers could also provide a cache node or an edge node with the end users as well too. So it could be sitting next to your router as well. So there are many different kind of like physical locations where your edge could be, but then based on that, the capabilities will vary as well too.
Perfect. Last but not least, could you give me one as well, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with Pankaj. It's like, as far as like topology, when we think about the edge, we really think about it as kind of this continuum of compute or different functionality, right? Even if it's just delivery, where this kind of a paradigm shift away from compute happening as a function in the core data center or even on the client device, and kind of looking at anything intermediary, whether it's devices within a local network, whether it's the traditional, CDN edge pops, or any sort of compute point in between. And I think more I guess applicable to what we're doing, really, we think of compute today as a function of the CDNs, an extension beyond delivery, simply because they are service providers that offer this, as a commercial solution that we're already working with. They minimize, infrastructure, the ability for us to have to manage complex, infrastructure deployments, and when we're thinking about moving functionality to the edge, the real problem we're trying to solve is that of like scale and latency, and we're already partnering with CDNs to solve exactly those problems in the delivery space.
I'll stay with you for the next question. Use cases, right? So edge is still in its starting phase, actually, if you look at it in general. So if you look at video workflows, content delivery, what are use cases where you are using it today, or you will be using it in the future that can set an example of what people think about?
Sure. Yeah, we have two use cases today. One of them sort of in production, and we're using daily, and then another one is sort of a POC that we built. But one, I guess the first one is sort of out of band of a delivery workflow, video delivery, but it's directly related to it. And it really had to do with simplifying some logic that we were running in client devices, browsers specifically. So we have, we perform our CDN decisioning based off of RUM data, test object downloads, and beacons from a client that essentially report back a given user's performance to when mapped to a number of different edges. And what we used to do was derive those performance beacons, whether it was availability, time to first byte, time to last byte, throughput, in the client itself, in the browser or in the app, and then basically have a series of HTTP posts to our backend. And it created, several problems, really noisiness in the client. Client issues became very difficult to debug, and there was a lot of bandwidth, and even some low power devices had some processing issues with the amount of computation we were doing. So we kind of wanted to port a lot of that functionality to the edge. And or really what we wanted to do was just port it to the back end, and the edge was the logical place just because of the scalability. It was able to handle all of those beacon posts. So basically what we've done is simplify the client to just do one HTTP post, zip up a raw data dump of our data set, which is the browser's resource timing API. And then we derive all of those beacons at the edge and then post them to our database. So, it definitely required low latency. We needed those measurements as soon as possible. It required high scale because we have users all over the world. And, we needed to do it in a cost-effective way. So that was our sort of first edge deployment. And then one that we're thinking up right now that we kind of have a POC around is related to tokenization. So we have some requirements to create tokens outside of the client. And basically this service would need to be highly scalable and fast, so not to slow down video start times. And the idea would be prior to downloading, an initial manifest or an initial object for a video stream, we would do an out of band request to an edge service and then rewrite the request with the token in the file path and then redirect to the CDN.
Interesting use case. Pankaj, can you give a one or two from a business standpoint?
Yeah, and I think maybe I can speak broadly as well too, and not necessarily just focus on the Disney side, but I think the use cases for edge, for the longest time we've been talking about manifest manipulation, and it still remains one of the big important ones, wherein the manifest contains the complete set of bit rates and resolutions that a content pipeline has created for consumption by the different variety of players and devices. But maybe a specific set of devices just needs up to 720p, but the other one needs all the way up to 4K. But you have two options. One is to create a manifest per device category, so to speak. The other is to actually have some dynamic means of modifying the base manifest and then kind of strip things out of it so that you have 720p specific manifest just for some, and then for everything within that. So that manifest manipulation has been around for such a long time. It's been implemented with CDNs as well too, either as a one-click offering or through writing your own JavaScript or Python code as well too. Another one, just to make a plug for standards, CMCD, the Common Media Client Data Spec, has allowed for making the CDNs a little bit smarter, because the CMCD spec provides some intelligence or through metadata that it passes to the CDN. And so with that, prefetching is a very common use case, and it has tended to show performance benefits as well too. And with prefetching, basically the player is kind of sending some information. Well, the player is asking every so often, I need segment 1, segment 2. But along with that, it passes in metadata, which says that if I'm asking for segment 1, I'm going to be asking segment 2 in the next 6 seconds. And so that's enough information for the CDN to actually trigger prefetching. And I think one final thing, one final thing I'll probably say is that edge dictionaries are probably becoming more and more prevalent among CDNs. And surprisingly, edge dictionaries open up so much of capabilities with respect to what you can or cannot do. As an example, you can just have edge dictionaries that you can manipulate through your CDN operations team within your company to say which origin to select, which backend origin to select, or manage load distribution across 2 or 3 different origins that you have. And these are actually very powerful use cases, but with something as simple as edge dictionaries at the CDN that allows you to actually make these very small but very important changes without actually having to make constant changes to the CDN's delivery config. So these are some really good examples that we have seen and used, and rather also planning to use as well too.
Cool. Wade, can you give some ideas about from a Zenlayer perspective? Of course, that's a broader perspective in general, but from your perspective on this case.
Yeah, I'll keep it closer to streaming, the streaming stuff. But what we have seen is video surveillance is one, because they will process images at the edge and then only send back relevant data. So when you're talking about these emerging markets, you don't want to dump everything back to an origin, right? It's too expensive, it's too much content. So that becomes really cool. Net storage, they kind of touch on that. You'll be able to set multiple origins in different regions. That helps quite a bit as well. We've seen a lot of stuff where they use it for ingest points, so large file transfer, moving data between regions for a lot of the photo shoots, helping have that backend infrastructure in place so they can do the post-processing and that work a lot faster. And then not necessarily writing on public internet, but on private backbones connecting between the regions, and you can accelerate that kind of file transfer. Dynamic workloads, because a lot of the CDNs are really good at pushing out content, but when you have a lot of users generating content or anything's a little bit more dynamic, you need to talk back and forth with the origin. So when those are closer to the end users, that helps a lot. And a big one where we've seen is definitely gaming, right? Gaming, a lot of gaming servers, they always cry about latency. So you need to find places where it's closer to your end users regionally. So those are a couple of the big cases we've seen on the edge side.
Cool. Very nice. Kevin, from an AWS standpoint, I know you have a couple of different media customers as well, including the two that are here. But can you give us one or two examples that have not been mentioned yet by others that you think are really relevant to take a look at?
Yeah, I would take a step back. So traditionally, the edge is being used as cache and deliver live video streams to remote locations that reduce latency and improve overall quality of experience. But more and more that we see is more bi-directional. So the use case I provide was, one way. So use edge to stitch video into one stream instead of sending all the stream back to the origin to do the processing and send it back. That definitely help alleviate some processing and bandwidth. And by having edge locations geographically close to the end users, TCP and TLS connections are established faster. So if the events are cached at the edge, it loads up even quicker for the end users. Some provider also maintain connections between the edge location and the origin, so the TCP and TLS sessions does not have to be reestablished every single request. So there are various tools for optimization to handle those protocols. To name some of the few just off my head, top of my head, we have TCP fast open, TLS session resumption, TCP congestion control, cache to hit ratio optimization, and especially with VODs, dealing with long tail content where a VOD is no longer present in a cache. So just to handle better playback, error handling, and that could be implemented. I can go on and on, but we ran out of time. So
all about ran out of time, exactly.
I'll just leave at that.
Yeah, perfect. Lots of possibilities, at least. Now I'll stay with you, Kevin, for the next one. Starting with edge for a lot of people is very is a step, really needing to make a step before moving in that direction. So if people want to start with edge, what are things that really need to think about to avoid pitfalls and etc. in starting to use the edge? Do you have any ideas or best practices you can give on this?
Yeah, so you're talking more, are you talking more a business case or the
general
case?
I need to start with edge, and we know it's important. We want to, for instance, we look at latency, we look at different capabilities of edge. What are things, how can I start? And what are the pitfalls that I shouldn't definitely avoid moving into that direction?
Yeah, so for the folks who are new and want to get into edge, there are several reasons why edge case is a buzzword, despite many possibility it presents. First, edge is relatively new compared to CDN that's well understood for many years. So organizations still try to find the best way to leverage it. It also comes with a cost as well. So if you don't know how to fully implement the edge, it could be costly. Second, edge could be very complex as well to implement, especially for the organization that's not familiar with the distributed system or edge computing. Implementing an edge solution will require, if you want to do it yourself, will require significant investment in hardware, software, and expertise. And that could be a barrier of adoption to many organizations. If you want to do it, have a cloud provider to host the edge, then you need to understand the return of investment, ROI, for edge solutions. And that could be difficult to quantify as well. So that could be challenging just to justify the investment. Whether it could benefits from improved performance, reduced latency, increased efficiency, all of those could be quite difficult to measure and will take quite some time to realize the gains. And fourth, I would say lack of standardization as well in the edge ecosystem, which can make it very challenging for organizations to adopt integration to the edge. And I think Sean earlier mentioned token and PC as well. And managing tokens between different providers, that's a nightmare in itself. And it's almost, you would tear your hair out. So, in conclusions, I just give several pretty high level reasons for the complexity. And it's also difficult to quantify ROI. And those could be the reason that prevent newer organization adopt edge and get into the edge.
Wait, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so for us, like, we really see edge as an extension of a core that's probably built into the cloud, or where the origins are, and then we allow them to do on ramps or direct connects, bring the edge directly into that cloud environment. And a lot of things that happen there, we do processing from simple tasks at the edge, or you can look at cost savings by delivering data locally instead of going international, like Kevin kind of talked about that, right? A really concrete example, if you were looking to do something in Vietnam and you deliver local traffic, it's probably like $1 a meg or something. Once it gets international, you need to go outside of Vietnam. Maybe it's like $11 or $20 a meg. So that's pretty common in a lot of these kind of emerging markets, because international traffic tends to be very expensive. So there's a lot of cost savings there on how you can kind of look at it. It also provides, they're talking about CDN. You have a lot of bilateral ability and more functions that you can build in rather than just a one-way delivery of data. And then another big one that we run across a lot now for edge is regulatory issues, because data compliance, it has to reside in the country where some of the users are. So you have to be able to store that. And then CDN cache doesn't count for that, right? So those are some of the things we see. But I think the takeaway is that when you look at every organization that wants to go into edge, you really need to look at their use case and what they're going to do and how they want to use that, because it is definitely unique and there's benefits and detractions for each one.
Yeah. Pankaj, I know you are eager to tell about.
Yeah, I want to say I bring some hope here. I think from a content provider's point of view, just to kind of get to some points that Kevin mentioned, I think it's very valid that token is a perfect example where every CDN has a different token scheme because lack of standardization. Sorry to make another pitch for standards. Common access token through CTA Wave is trying to solve that. And the Hulu case, we have the same exact problem. It's really difficult to manage one token per CDN. We are planning to go with common access token. That just makes our life so much simpler, allows us to open up a bunch of other capabilities from an edge compute point of view on the CDNs, such as token revocation, wherein a security ACL that is historically based at the account level, when someone says, I want to watch this piece of content, but they can somehow still bypass it depending upon the capabilities, and hence they can watch it on the CDN. So revocation is another edge compute case. But to the actual question of like pitfalls to avoid in best practices, I think like for us on the CDN space for media delivery, just take baby steps. And the one thing that we have learned here is that go with the CDN's delivery configuration, break out the code from the configuration. Your configuration is basically, let's say, timeouts that you have towards the player, persistent connection times, times towards the origin. Break out the code from the configuration so you build a little bit of experience with how you can actually use edge dictionaries and deploy these configs into the code that is already running on the CDN. So for North America, you can have a specific timeout And for EU or LATAM, you could have a different timeouts towards your origin, but manage all through your edge dictionaries. That's probably just kind of one step to go with that. The other thing is that you can go with stateless transactions. Manifest manipulation is a great example through which you can start out things. You can use Python code or JavaScript or Rust or whatever in a WASM environment. Now, obviously, there is multi-CDN challenges, and you can actually be a little bit clever about that, wherein, let's say, CDN1 doesn't have WASM, but CDN2 does. And if CDN1 doesn't have enough traffic that it's delivering for you, you can have CDN1 point to CDN2 for manifest delivery. So CDN2 acts as a CDN for all your end users, but it can also act as the origin for CDN1. And so that way you're still able to deploy manifest manipulation, even though if all of your CDNs within your distribution mesh don't support that. And then minimize outside dependencies. So if your edge compute function is running and it's kind of making outside network calls, maybe try to avoid that if possible, because you get a specific time budget and memory budget at the compute for the compute at the edge. And so you have to be mindful of like what external dependencies are, and then also then plan for failure cases and also graceful degradation. So those are like baby steps in how I would kind of approach edge compute.
Cool. Sean, do you have anything to add from your standpoint?
I think, folks have covered a lot. I guess just to echo the same sentiment around standards, we talked about the tokenization stuff. Pankaj, what he described is a very similar challenge as to what we have, and it was actually a common token schema was a requirement for our token authentication service, simply because we didn't want to break midstream CDN switching, which has been sort of a pillar to our multi-CDN strategy. Obviously, creating the token is really what we need to the business logic that needs to exist at the edge. But if we can create a common token, it just simplifies that business logic. So we're all for these standards. They're really helping, actually enable functionality, these value add features of the CDN. But in terms of best practices when deploying, deploying services at the edge, most edge platforms today have Terraform providers. We use them. It makes deployments a lot easier. We're able to just, test our code that's running at the edge in our standard CI/CD pipelines. There's nothing really different than, testing an edge service than there is any serverless platform like, Google Cloud Run or any of these. So, I mean, it fits right into our development pipeline. A lot of vendors have their own sort of CLIs within the CI/CD deploy apps, but we usually opt for, like I said, the Terraform deployments to standardize things. Really, what I think we're going to be waiting for is multi-language support across multiple edge providers. Right now, a lot of our edge application, we're only using one provider for our edge applications, and we don't want to. It's the same infrastructure that's running the CDNs in a lot of cases, and we've made it like a major point of our strategy to have multi-CDN for delivery. So we want to do the same for edge, especially for these edge services that are so coupled with delivery. And we haven't been able to quickly port port one service from one edge provider to another. So I'm hoping that there's more standardization, in the coming years to support that. And I don't want to say commoditize the edge, but we want to get to a point of standardization like we are with the CDN for edge compute deployments.
This is a good segue in one of the other questions I had in mind, really about multi-CDN or multi-CDN. We have multi-CDN, we have multi-cloud. Multi-edge is the next one. What is holding us back? What needs to be done? And you already answered this a little bit, Sean. What needs to be done to make sure that we have multi-edge in a working mode? I mean, you mentioned multiple languages at edge, more standardization. Are there any other points you think need to be addressed?
I'd have to think about that a little bit. Curious to get other folks' perspective, but the Terraform deployment, which is I think pretty standard across the board, multi-language support. I guess, what's happening under the hood, how the whether it's edge workers or computed edge, how they're actually implementing some of the compute technology is kind of transparent to us. So I don't know if that would matter too much, but I guess it really also depends on what your application is. So like in the case of our multi-CDN strategy, we're able to build logic into either the client, the manifest itself, or DNS to basically load balance the CDNs. I don't know exactly how we would do that, or it's not a problem we've really solved yet for multi-edge deployments. So like if we have a service that's called, before stream start or even midstream or what have you, how do you know which edge to go to? How do you know if one edge is performing better, more cost effectively, or, is down altogether? That's probably a problem I think we're going to need to solve before we do these, multi-edge deployments. But yeah, curious to get the rest of the panelists.
It's more on the monitoring side in that regard. Pankaj, can you share your take on this?
Yeah, I think I was just going to mention about monitoring, monitoring and troubleshooting and clearing the logs. I think there has to be commonality around that. And then I want to say that because we don't operate that infrastructure, we in the sense that as a client, you are using someone else's infrastructure, so you would expect that infrastructure to be available to you. And if some node or some region is unavailable for capacity reasons, define capacity however you want to define it, then that should be temporarily unavailable to you. And I think if with those optics point of view, load and capacity, the more oblivious we are to it, probably seems like the better thing to do. But I'm sure there will always be edge cases. Like in our case, we do want to understand CDN's network capacity, so we can be a little bit more dynamic with respect to how we interact with the CDN, because our players are a little bit more intelligent. I'd imagine that some point down the road, I'd probably make a statement that we want to know how much of compute capacity you have as well too, or how much of storage capacity you have, like edge databases as well too. We are certainly not there yet, but maybe that might be one case wherein some more visibility into how that edge is operating, how much of headroom it has or not, that might become relevant as more and more of the edge starts to get used for these use cases.
So basically, if I go back to CDNs in general, they're always referred to as black boxes, right? We want to have a little bit more transparency on the black boxes on edge, as well, just to have a little bit more understanding, especially because there are more variables in edge than just with CDN. Typically, is capacity or storage, and that's it. But there are much more variables with edge in that regard.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of trust that has to go with that statement, that treat us as a black box, and invariably sometime in the future, the customer is going to ask a lot of questions, and you have to open up things so that it's a mutual understanding is shared between the provider and the client, so that the better use of infrastructure can happen.
Yeah, managing the edge infrastructure, it's kind of a blessing and a curse in that regard. The visibility and just the fact that today we don't even have eyes on it. It's good and bad, because it's not like a lot of apps that we're deploying in our own Kubernetes infrastructure, right? Like we have full DevOps eyes on everything, on the infrastructure, right? The blessing is we don't need to worry about that. So like in the ETL sort of application I mentioned with these beacon posts, right? Like we know that our edge compute provider is just going to scale with load, and it works, and it hasn't broken yet, and that's great. But the day that it does break, the day that a PUP does go down, or these compute instances are overloaded, we're gonna want visibility. And so I think right now today, it's these edge platforms aren't like they're not open like running your own bare metal, running your own Kubernetes, but they're also they're a little bit too closed. We have to find that even medium for how much visibility and control that we really want over that infrastructure. The few deployments we have today, I think it's just been a blessing that we don't have to worry about that stuff. It's one less thing for our DevOps to worry about. That can change in the future.
Yeah, because if you're SSAI model running on the edge breaks down and monetization disappears, and that's not going to be a good day for both the client and the infrastructure provider.
Wait, I'm sure you have a saying on your end based on what you guys are doing within Zenlayer.
Yeah, it's it's very interesting. A lot of the issues that they raise. So, like on our side, we try to give as much control, flexibility, and visibility to our clients. So even though we have 300 some odd pops, it's a bare metal cloud. It's the full compute stack, right? And then we're very well peered. So wherever we are, like it tends to be very close or even in the same DCs that the CDN pops. So as a multi CDN, that actually works really well because there's no latency or you don't have to pay for that traffic because we're peered with them and it takes the best routes. Another interesting one is, they talked about containers. We definitely see that. That is very interesting. The containers, Kubernetes, you have like EKS Anywhere, GKE, all the Kubernetes. A lot of people are managing those, and then those become easier because you can deploy something similar across pretty much everywhere, whether it's virtual machines, bare metal, and then you can control the containers, and they even have their own kind of load balancers. So we're seeing a lot more movement in that direction when they're looking at doing multiple edges. And for us, one thing that we try to be careful about is having that redundancy, like, within the different regions and the cities, because like you said, if it's a critical infrastructure, you want to have some backup. If that service fails, you have to have something there in order to support that or be able to move it to somewhere else that still has that decent latency and everything still works, right? So those become pretty important on our side. And because we work with a lot of our clients for custom solutions, we're able to give them a lot more flexibility in terms of what they need to either deliver in that region or implement it into their workload. And I think that makes it a little bit unique and that we're so close to all the CDNs too.
Kevin, what's your take on this?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to acknowledge nice pun that PC sneaked in where he talked about edge cases when we're talking about edge services. So I thought that was really good. I don't think people catch that. But anyway, managing a large scale edge deployments across multiple regions is complex already. Now we're adding multi-cloud environment. That's very complex. So I think a lot of things that the panelists already mentioned, such as monitoring, I think we need to have a centralized management as well. So organizations could use a centralized management tool to manage all the config deployments and monitor all their edge services. You don't want them to jump to different window or to different panes just to see, the different pops or different locations. That will help reduce and simplify the management process and reduce risk of errors. Automation, CI/CDs mentioned quite a bit. Automation is quite important as well, just to manage software updates, config, and just to push the code in and reduce operation overhead. Scalability, I think that's also important too. You need the solution to accommodate, to grow and scale up and down as needed. One thing I didn't hear us mention is security. I think security should be number one, top priority when deploying edge, because we not only we got to protect the data, we got to protect access controls and encryptions and everything else included. So we could talk about level 7, layer 7 protection, where you could prevent application attacks. Such as scraping, SQL injection, account takeovers. Going down the OSI layer, we should also have layer 4 protections as well. So rules in the load balancers and API gateways. We should also block DDoS attack as well when the hackers are trying to overwhelm your application with large quantity of network requests. So overall, I think for media and entertainment companies, they should focus on what they do the best, which is content, and leave DevOps to do DevOps. So this way, combining with cloud and DevOps, it eliminate the overhead of managing physical infrastructures and minimize administration of some of the things I've mentioned, like installation, configuration, and just maintain on the creative side. And so compute, network, storage, all of that is leave it to the folks who does the best, DevOps. So doing so, I think we could have a more agile CI/CD methodology into the mix, and that allows speed and agility, cost savings, and all of that. Bring that into the market.
I'm pretty sure both Pankaj as well as Sean agree that less DevOps is better. So I think that's a good thing. Now let's talk about money. So of course technology is, but hey, it's all backed by money in the end. Edge in general is more costly than CDNs or clouds in terms of deployment, in terms of management, etc., etc. If I go to you, Pankaj, if you look at the business case of use cases that you had so far, were there use cases where eventually you came out to the conclusion, yeah, this is a very nice use case technically or operationally, but from a financial standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense? Could you highlight those? And also the other way where you were surprised that actually using Edge was actually very beneficial in comparison to the, let's say, the standard way of working that we have right now?
Yeah, I'll try to answer it in general sense. But this is going to be specific. If you look at manifest manipulation, when I was at Akamai, I was a CDN guy. So create a product, sell it to your customers. This is the best thing in the world, and it is the best thing in the world. But as a customer, you have to see that line item show on your invoice that you are paying that much for every single manifest request that goes in. A manifest manipulation module runs there. And I think that's probably okay. It depends on the cost, but you could probably be clever about that by actually moving manifest manipulation to your backend origin. So all your CDNs are funneling into your origin. And if your origin has some level of programmability, then you can actually have some level of manifest manipulation defined there as well too. The downside here is that the 100 different variations of a multivariant HLS manifest file or a -MPD, those requests are all going back to the end user, back to the origin, and the origin is actually doing the compute for every single media title that is being watched at that particular point in time. So now you have taken up the compute, but you're not paying the cost to the price to the money to the CDN. And so maybe there is a little bit of trade-off there. It's use case specific. It's up to you how you want to kind of look at it, how much it makes sense. Another example where actually use of Edge on the CDN has turned out to be a lot more beneficial for us from an engineering cost point of view. So we're planning to roll out, if you're planning to roll out a new infrastructure on the backend side, let's say you build another origin in Las Vegas or in San Diego, where I am. And if you want to use that San Diego origin, how do you actually introduce that into your delivery flow? You can choose to say that of the 100,000 end users at any given point in time, you're going to pick 1% of them and have some signaling in that playback session, which causes the CDN to go to the San Diego origin. But that means on the services side running in AWS, you have to have the code and whatnot. And if you don't have the code written already, obviously you're going to spend engineering effort there. But the other approach is that you can actually have through Edge key value pairs or Edge dictionary, at the CDN level define 1% of the requests are actually going towards San Diego origin, then not. So trade-off, how much of engineering resources are available, where you can actually spin some up and save some. I gave like two examples, one in which case we took up the cost, we took up the effort of doing manifest manipulation, but in the other case, we're looking to use the CDN to actually do the work, but then save the engineering effort that other teams would have to do, which would have been a lot more costly for us.
Good. So we need a lot more brains on the kind of providers to make sure we make the right decisions on what to use where.
Yeah, always, I guess, like always keep an eye open with respect to like what functionality you're trying to achieve. What is the risk of doing something one way or the other, and have all the tools, the toolbox open for you, and don't always assume that compute is always in services.
Oh, did we lose Mark?
Yeah, I think Mark is frozen. Mark, we lost you for a few seconds.
I'm back. Sean, what's your take on this?
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to TCO and, a cost benefit analysis, right? And I guess I'd just highlight two different scenarios. One is a scenario in which you're using edge compute to solve a problem that you haven't yet solved, and the other is you're basically porting an existing service or solution from somewhere to the edge. And those are two different, vastly different use cases, right? So like for us, we basically, in that ETL example that I gave, right, we're adding an additional cost to our data pipeline that didn't exist. It didn't cost us anything to run code on the client, other than you can argue some client performance, right? Were we willing to take on the cost of putting in an edge service that will derive all of these performance beacons for the added benefit of solving the client side performance problem, getting changes out more quickly, making a more scalable solution? The answer there was yes. The amount we were actually spending to run that lightweight ETL job is very low. It's lower than it would have been if we had done it in a core cloud data center. So the economics just worked out. Manifest manipulation was brought up a couple of times, and we have a manifest generation service, a manifest personalization service that runs in core data center. When we're talking about porting that functionality to the edge, we'd look at what's the TCO, right? Or how much are we going to pay for? How much are we going to save in really egress bandwidth for egress fees from the origin? That it's just going to move to CDN egress, or it's going to be a quantifiable amount of money that'll move the needle versus the time spent to rewrite the application in a manner that would work across the edge. And obviously then there's the problem of what does it look like in a multi-CDN environment? In that particular scenario, we went through that sort of reasoning, and we found that it didn't make economic sense for us to port an existing solution that really wasn't too expensive to the edge. It would have cost engineering time. It would have really increased complexity for how we manage the upstream CDN requests unless we could get the same behavior across CDNs. So like the cost benefit analysis was just like, no, keep it in the core compute data center. Don't port to the edge. So, we never really approach the idea of edge compute of, oh, well, we need, this edge compute solution. We think through the problem, we'll do the cost benefit analysis. And then if it makes sense to run a particular service at the edge, we'll take advantage of, the scale and speed it offers.
Wait, I'm sure you have a saying on this from your end. Could you give like one or use case that you think, okay, this is really one easy?
Yeah, I think both Sean, he said what I was thinking. Like, it's really about the TCO, right? Because it really depends on what problem they're trying to solve, right? Is edge even the right thing to use in a lot of cases? And then if it is, naturally, it's going to either resolve a problem for you or it's going to save cost. But you have to make that distinction up front. Like, what are you trying to solve, and is edge the best thing to use to solve that? Because if CDN is the best, then you should go with that. It's not always it's not like one or the other. You could use all of these in combination. For gaming companies, they do this, right? They use CDN to deliver the large file of the games. They use the edge to host the game the game servers, and then they have something in the cloud to do all of the authentication, origination, and a lot of those other things. So it's really about how you use it and what problem you're trying to solve. I think that's the most important thing, to optimize your TCO.
Okay. Kevin, from your standpoint?
Yeah, I agree. The use of edge definitely could have a positive impact on the business. However, implemented wrong, it could be very costly as well. And it's not something as simple as I'll just plug out whatever I use at the CDN or the origin and put it on the edge and call it end of the day. That's not going to work. So ultimately, the decision to use edge will depend on a variety of factors, including requirements of services, your budget, and the potential benefits and cost savings.
Okay, cool. then the last question I have, and then we'll go to at least I see one Q&A here, which is the $1 million question. And just give me the answer, yes or no, in this regard. Will Edge replace cloud and CDN, or will it be an add-on on what we already have? Kevin?
So in the next couple of years, it's unlikely that Edge will replace cloud and CDN from my purview. Each technology has its own unique advantages and disadvantages, like we discussed, and they're suited for different use cases. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through each, but I think ultimately they all have their use, and each technology have its own strengths and weaknesses. And I think we should combine all three to make it the best way possible.
Wade?
Yeah, I agree. I think Kevin hit the nail on the head. Like, there's nothing else to add to that.
Okay. Sean?
Yep, agreed. I think that the trend of thinking about these as well, I think CDN will always exist. It serves its purpose for delivery, and then for compute, I think people will stop thinking about core compute versus edge compute and start thinking about compute as a continuum where there's areas we haven't even yet talked about or thought up yet, and each application will find its its relevant place to be run.
Okay. Pankaj?
I think it's been put eloquently by these guys, so don't really have anything much to add.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for the session. I have one Q&A question. It's a pretty long one though. I got another one in. One is about security, and if I got the question right, because it's a really long one, what can we do on the edge in terms of security to make our lives simple, to avoid especially attacks and stuff on the edge? Any insights from anyone on this? I'm pretty sure Amazon and Zenlayer have some ideas on this, on how can edge be used to stop attacks, etc., instead of deploying local firewalls and stuff.
I can chime in real quick on this one. What we see is, you're hearing about zero with clients like Fortinet, where they have the firewall. They allow for virtual options. You can put these at the edge. You can set it up where all the traffic, potentially in a region, right? Like let's say in a particular country goes to one regional data center, and then all the security goes to that first, right? And then from there it can filter out and go somewhere else. And that helps reduce a lot of the latency, because you're not saying, hey, I have one central place where everything's kind of hairpinning and going through and sending the traffic back. Like you can set up these regional hubs, and then the security will go there before it goes somewhere else. And then you can optimize the paths on the back end, right? With either private line capacity or when you build that mesh network, or if there's one that's existing, it already optimizes and checks everything and gives you that redundancy in place. So that's one way to do it.
Okay, good. Another question I just got in, and I haven't read it yet. How will interactivity be addressed in CDN networks? Can or is the current manifest content distribution model scale to support interactivity? I'll leave that to Pankaj.
I'm not quite sure what is meant by interactivity in CDN networks.
I assume the back and forth that you can do. So my guess,
content distribution model scale.
I think it's more about compute and manifest over and over and over again. That will be my guess on how I read the question.
Yeah, I don't think manifest manipulation is designed for two ways. It's just purely a playlist on what needs to be played out. In terms of interactivity, there will need to be additional things such as dynamic APIs and additional calls.
I got to be that guy and give you all the hook. I apologize for that, but we do have to wrap. Yes, thanks so much, Mark and Kevin and Wade and Pankaj and Sean. That was terrific. Interactivity, that last question, we will be having a session on interactivity. If I could remember the schedule, I'd know when it is. But if you want to know more about interactivity, check our Streaming Media Connect schedule and look for that session later today or certainly later in the week. Again, thanks to everyone for participating. The Amazon gift card winner is Gloria Benally, who got immediately that the music we heard during the slides was Sweetback's theme by Melvin Van Peebles featuring Earth, Wind, and Fire. Gloria, keep an eye out on your email for information about that gift card toward the end of the week. Thanks again to our sponsors, Zenlayer for sponsoring this panel and CDN for being the diamond sponsor of Streaming Media Connect. We have a very cool session coming up in just under 30 minutes. An interview with DJ Deadmau5, who not only knows his DJing, but he knows his streaming. I think you'll be impressed. Hope to see you then. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.